wanted to build on a couple of points coming from Gopal's session. So I think the Ranjit asked, I think he has gone out, about the family constitution part of it. There's a lot of mystery about family constitution, and I keep getting invitations or requests to write family constitution maybe once a fortnight, and to the extent of saying that, can you write it and mail it to us and with the invoice so that we can settle the bill immediately. Okay, family constitution is a document which actually reflects the thoughts, aspirations, and principles that the families believe in. It actually clarifies a lot of thoughts, clarifies a lot of challenges, dilemmas, particularly in relation to, for instance, it could be about ownership, it could be about entitlements, it could be about employment, it could be about remuneration, retirement kind of thing, which essentially means that we are coming to the interface of family and business. Okay, so that's where a lot of clarity needs to be there. I mean, there are very often questions about inheritance, whether you can pass over the shares, ownership to somebody else or not. What are the implications? When can you do that? How do you prevent the shares ownership from going from within the family to outside? Also about who can come and join the business, what are the entitlements, what are the restrictions, okay, and whether the rewards will be the same or not, whether you will have a performance appraisal system or not, and when do you retire, who is going to manage the wealth. There are a lot of areas which are often not discussed within the family. We assume many things, and people assume the way they want to interpret. Okay, and it could be also starting a new venture. I've seen this issue. It's an issue in several families that you want to start a business, and somebody will start the business without having clarity about ownership part of it, without having clarity about where the funds will come. If someone is starting, somebody else can also start. So a constitution actually means the result, the outcome of a process of discussion, process of sharing thoughts and coming to some sort of a consensus. Okay. So it will have policies and also processes. Processes particularly for situations where you do not have a policy. Okay. Sometimes you don't envisage a situation. So far everybody has gone back to the family business, and someone wants to start a completely different, let's say an app, an online business or something, and the question will be who is going to own the shares, whether it would be by the family, whether by the branch, by the individual or not. So there could be situations like that. There could be, for instance, shares can be passed over from one generation to the others of the same family. Okay. If someone adopts children, can you pass over the shares to them? There may not be any policy written. So there will be sort of a committee which will deliberate and then decide what to do. Maybe involving everybody, maybe involving few people. So that's the process. So where there is no policy, we think of the process. Typically in the family context, what we do is that if there is a dispute, leave it to the eldest or elder people to decide. That's a process. Okay. So the family constitution will have policies and processes, but these are arrived at through a process of deliberation, discussion. And in the process, a lot of awareness comes, a lot of clarity comes, a lot of understanding among the family members come. I think that is the essence of the family constitution, or which reflects the family governance mechanism. And yet another point was that what keeps the family together, what keeps it sustainable. And I was having a discussion with him about this part, and the fundamental thing what he said is that you have to answer one question: is it good for you or good for the family? The basic question is it priority wise, is it good for the family? It may not be the best thing for you, but if the decision or the solution is good for the family, then go for it. Which means that the family is more important than you. You are a subset of the family. Okay. So those who take the view, those who believe in it, then there is no problem. Okay. That is what is the essence of servant leadership. You are a trustee. Like the way Gopal said about the watch. You have the right to look at the watch, but you don't have the right to sell it. Or we say you can keep the cow, but you can't, you can use the milk, but you can't sell the cow. Okay. So you have the response. So that's the essence of the family togetherness also. Yet another part I wanted to discuss is about professionalism and professionalization. There was also discussion about it earlier. Often I find that the challenge in the family business is small things. Small instances add to problems. One simple thing I very often find is use of credit card. Okay. There is no policy about using credit card. There is sort of an understanding that official is to be of company and personal is personal. But very often people treat the personal expenses as official. Okay, this is one. The second is that there are gray areas. Okay, I go invite my friends for a dinner, and I may have discussion on the business also there. Should I treat it as a business expense? Should I treat it as a personal expense? Okay. Then there are perceptions. Perceptions about, I mean, I take friends for business meetings very often, dinners very often. And then you are sitting there, you think that whether that is required or not. Okay. And in one of the families I worked recently, we had this two brothers and a nephew. One of the brothers is highly networking oriented. He is into CII, he is into TIE, he is into local other association. He travels abroad often, and which was not liked by the other brother. There are business benefits, but there are a lot of unwanted travel also. So we had this open discussion about what to do, whether it is good, what are the implications for the business. So finally we agreed that whoever is representing can have 2 institutional organizational membership or positions paid for by the company, and if for the organization's requirements, if you have to travel, you can have 2 international travels. Third, with an exceptional situation. Beyond that, if he wants to do it, it has to be from the personal funds. But this was discussed, debated, but this has been a lingering issue within the family, between the brothers for several years. They never took it up, they never had this discussion. But when we had this discussion, we looked at the pluses, minuses, implication for the family, implication for the individual. Then there was a consensus. Okay. So that's a process of taking up the decision. And so professionalism, sometimes many of the issues related to professionalism, practice of professionalism, will be at the interface of family and business. Okay. So that becomes very, very important as part of the overall transformation of the family business, the family governance, professionalization or professionalism. These are all quite intertwined. To me, the professionalization or professionalism is a double game. Often it is beyond the family. I call the family professional and non-family professional. I don't call family and professional, because I believe that family members are professionals. And these days, particularly family members are supposed to behave like professionals once they are wearing the formal cap. Okay. So it is like a doubles game. The reason is that it is impossible to define the areas of territory at the top. At the top, it could be between family member and non-family member. What's the role you are going to play? What's the role the other person is going to play? It is impossible to define. Okay. There are also challenges. Challenges in the sense of, let's say that very often, this is a big challenge I've seen in mid-sized family businesses, which may be, whether you call it 500 crores, 50 crores or even 5,000 crores. I call all of them into the mid-sized family business. typical challenge is that if you are the head of the business, you are the responsible person for the entire range of operations. And then you want to recruit somebody either as a CEO or a technology officer, CEO, whatever title you give, and you promise that person full freedom because you want to attract this person, especially if that person is talented, experienced. You don't want to lose him. It's him or her, okay. It's a big task. So you want to attract, and that person would ask, how much of freedom I have? Do I have to come and respect you every day? Do I have to come and give you pranam every day? Or no, you don't have to do any of those things. You will have complete freedom. You will have a review meeting once a month or something like that, okay. So you promise that this is family executive or family professional, and you divide it as non-family executive. This is the territory for him, this is the territory. But this full freedom is never explained. Okay. Full freedom for me who has been running this show means that you have the freedom to take the decision, but please check with me. Okay. You can take any decision, you can appoint a new dealer, you can have a new vendor identified, but check with me before you finally decide. Okay. So that check with me is very important for me. Whereas so that means that this is what I think I wanted. The boundary is. For the other person who has, let's say, worked for a structured organization like the ICICI or ITC or Levers or any of the good so-called structure system driven organization, he would think that full freedom means here. This is FE, and here, this entire area, the family executive wants to withdraw from operations, he would leave the entire freedom to me. Okay. So that itself creates a problem. And this is never defined. And I've seen this happening with some of the mid-sized companies which go around and recruit people from, I have a case where the 500 crore pharma business that recruited somebody, vice president from Unilever, and he stayed there for 6 months because he thought that the entire thing is his, and the family executive thought that this is up to here. They never had a discussion on it. It was impossible to define that. Okay. He resigned, he left, and they recruited another person, he stayed for 1.5 years. Okay, left. Finally, the family man went back, started running it because they could not attract anybody else, because if you get this offer, you would find out what happened to the other 2 people. Okay. So then it was impossible. There is also another problem in this case, specific case, and several other cases, is that this is the territory given or promised, but in reality, this will be that. I didn't mean this. Please check with me is an additional thing. Okay. Then there is also another thing. My wife calls up and tells me that her cousin's nephew's sister's son runs a small business in somewhere, packaging unit. You require a lot of packaging, so why don't you buy from there? So I resist that initially, but then she insists, why don't you? But I have a promise, I have already committed to that person that I will do something. Okay, that's okay. So I call up this guy and say that I have appointed so and so to supply packaging material. Intrusion. Okay, encroachment into his territory. So there is one is intended, one is actual, and then there is occasional encroachment. That this itself, I call it as no man's land, which is undefined, completely mined. So unless the people understand how to manage this, one is that the family executive has to understand what the psyche of the other person who is coming, whether that person is oriented, whether you can work out things or not. That's one. Second is that this is a dynamic sphere. You cannot define it. At the factory floor, you can say that you have to produce 500 pieces a day. This is definite. But at the top level, you cannot, because that's the reason I call it as devil's game. Sometimes you may have to move forward and come to the net and take the ball. Sometimes you have to cover the other partner's position. So unless there is a perfect chemistry, it doesn't work out. Okay, so that's the key part. And therefore, professionalization very often doesn't happen. It is not only between family and non-family, it is between senior generation and junior generation, between partners within the organization itself. Unless this part, managing this no man's land, is clarified, it doesn't work. You can have structure, systems, processes, which are all typical definitions of professionalization. If you ask any of the professionals, if you ask any of the chartered accountants, they will say, or consultant, they will say that this is the organizational structure, you have to have this sort of reporting systems and processes. But reporting system is okay. I have a case where the father is a PhD from MIT, he is 80, 75, 80 years old. The son is the CEO. The chairman, when I have his discussion with him, he says that, Ram, much before you were born, I did my PhD in strategy, so I understand strategy and that's what I do. But when I ask the son, he says that my dad comes down 3 levels below and gives instruction directly to the district manager. Okay. And the district manager, whenever it is convenient, he uses my father. And whenever he wants to ask me, he asks me. Okay. In the process, what I'm saying is that this will not work unless that attitude is there on both sides. One. Second is that unless the players understand that playing this game is not easy, unless there is a full understanding between them to sort out issues whenever it comes up. So what it means is that if there is lack of clarity, okay, let's sit down. Who will do what? How are we going to decide? Okay. And I found that if that kind of a thing is there. So here for some reason, if he has to, if he is not there, if he comes in, okay, fine. Why did it happen? Can we sit down, discuss and find out why, what are the reasons? Is it permanently it is going to be? It may be. Or is it isolated case? Okay. So the key point is that if you want to have professionalization in the organization, one is professionalism should be there, and the family person should not wear the owner's hat when he is playing the game. It should be 2 players equal according to the requirements. That's why I took the photo of Leander and Bhupati because they made perfect chemistry. Even a few years back, when they went back to the New York Open after breaking up, they went up to the semis or something like that. I mean, unfortunately, they had this coach issue, but otherwise, the relationship with the chemistry is so perfect, and that's what is required. Okay, so the people who are at the family level, maybe the family, non-family, it may be among the family members, the understanding has to be that we have the business together, we have to cover the whole ground, we have to work out how to address it. And this is a dynamic ground. As the organization is moving from one level to another, if you are moving up, this relationship has to be dynamic. And that is the willingness required. And we take businesses that are good for the business, not for me. It doesn't matter. As I said, what is good for the family is more important. Similarly, what is good for the business is more important. Okay, I think that's the attitude required. So you have to have shared goals, capabilities have to be complemented, no one-upmanship. I think that's fundamental. And have role clarity as much as possible. Team is more important. Flexibility has to be a value. I tell families that unless flexibility is accepted as a value, I don't have a hard position, I'm ready to move around, and what is required is to manage the ambiguity. Okay. And in many families, in your cases, sometimes it is triangular. You have your senior generation, you have a non-family executive and yourself. And developing this equation among all the 3 is much more challenging. But recognize that there is a challenge and we will do whatever is required. And similar is this the succession. To me, succession is more like a relay race. Okay. And most often this is not addressed as a relay race. And relay race, some of the fundamental principles of a typical relay you can adopt. I mean, I took this photo of the Beijing Olympics, 4 into 100 meters. US is considered to be the supreme power in 4 into 100 meters over the decades. Okay. Even then they could not manage the handing over of the baton from one runner to the other. So some of the fundamental things in the relay race are parallel to what should be done in the family business context. Homework is very important. Who is going to succeed? Who is going to run this lap? Who is the best reflex person should run the first lap. The fastest accelerator should be the last lap. So depending on the phase of growth of the business, depending on the challenges of the business, the role should be clarified. Who should be there? So that's based on the homework. And timing is very important. And when somebody will detach, that's what Gopal was talking about, his father or grandfather who gave the key at 55 and said that I'm out of it. Okay, so speed of detachment, speed of handing over is important. If the person, that's a problem. Very often you say is that son, you take over, but you continue to hold the baton. Okay, then the son will not be able to move on, or daughter will not be able to move on, and you hold on, and in between you leave it thinking that the other person has held the, taken care of the baton. So that ambiguity should be avoided. So planning is very important. And exit route, post-retirement, what to do. And I don't use the word retirement. Redefinition of the role is more important. You don't retire. Retirement is a very bad word. Okay. There are multiple challenges of communication. From my experience, I classify them into 5. Goal confusion driven communication. There is lack of clarity about the goals. What kind of goals are required? You don't sit down and discuss the goals, and therefore people look at goals in different ways, and that leads to confusion in communication. Insecurity. The consequences of any decision will be bad for me about my position, my job, my presence, my status. So I object, I oppose, I resist any change. And I may communicate in a different way, but often it is because of this. And then there is ego. Because you didn't tell me that. And that leads to communication challenge. So next time I will fix it on you. Okay. So that happens very often. And it is the perception. It's not the reality. Reality, you are not smiling at me. And then typical human tendency is to look at it negatively. If someone doesn't call you, then you don't think that it may be because the phone is out of order, the person may be busy or something. No. There is a reason. Okay. And the typical human tendency is to look at it negatively. So perception driven communication challenges are very huge in families, and also role confusion driven communication challenges. So if you want to address all these things, some of the things required are basic values, inculcate and practice it. And often yet another problem is that people write down the values, but we don't think of practicing them. The key question is that, are we practicing? That's what I asked Gopal also. How do you practice? How do you ensure that the values are practiced? Okay. Again, transparency, I think you mentioned about transparency as a value. So, are we practicing? Are we open? Are we frankly communicating with other people? If you have an issue, do you communicate? Okay. So, vision and strategy, that also came up earlier on Gopal's presentation also. Vision having, I think Subbu also mentioned about the clarity of the vision, the passion and vision. Okay. So these are very, very important for the families. And if you go back to my slide, often that communication is incomplete about shared vision, shared strategy. Often the senior generation may be taking decisions without involving the next generation in the strategy and what to do. Similarly, systems and processes, all these things, structure, systems, processes, as I mentioned here, are important, but then human resources. Unless, because the family business is driven by human resources. Structure, system, processes may sit on the computer or the desktop, but the energy comes from human resources. And most of the energy, the source of the energizer is the family. So it is important to preserve, develop the human resource relationship within the family. And look at family as an organization. Okay, and it has implications for change, family changes, and as I mentioned earlier, the business changes, family changes. So you have to have that openness to admit that that flexibility is required, and then only things will work well. Okay, so you have to do the planning parallelly. Very often we are worried about targets, performance, efficiency on the business front. We assume the same thing on the family front. We need to have that kind of an approach on the family front. How are we together? What makes us together, live together or work together? What are the challenges? How are we going to address this? These issues, if you practice, you have family governance. If you want to write it down, then it becomes a family agreement or family constitution or something like that. So you have the option. I tell the people that this is a journey where multiple crisis points are there. Many families have gone up through this crisis and have multi-generational, but quite a few of them have remained there, but large number of them have gone down. They have not anticipated the challenges of transition and transformation. And if you do not have those things, then there is a huge challenge of breaking up. And that doesn't happen overnight. Most family challenges, my experience is that it gets built up over a period of time. Small issues affect them. It's more like, slowly the bad elements creep in and then affect the fundamentals, and then the foundation gets affected. Okay. Interest is growing on family business, the evidence that you are all here, and I find that interest across the country is growing. Many people now realize that family businesses are not bad, family businesses are not unprofessional. There is a huge resource basket, and that has to be tapped, and that is possible. And many of the people realize that there are now mechanisms to address the challenges. We have the strengths, there are threats, there are challenges. We can always address some of those things and move forward. Okay, so that's why I say that many people listen, some of them act. And my experience again, and I am emphasizing this now, is that most often you tend to postpone these things because these do not affect your bottom line immediately. Many people come for conferences, listen to lectures and say, oh, wow. And I have this biannual conference at ISB where we get some 350 plus people. And everybody says that I'm going to develop the family governance, professionalization, strategizing, everything. Once they go back, then the immediate question is that the customer is waiting, or the production is affected, or bank is asking for working capital adjustment, all kinds of things. Okay, we will come back to this, we will meet after 2 weeks. And the 2 weeks never happened, okay, until there is a crisis. Somebody is ready to pull the plug, and that will be too late. So my request to you is that start conversation, start a discussion within the family. You may not require a lot of outside help. Unfortunately, there are organizations such as Metis here. There are not many organizations which are with intent of service. Okay, that's very important. I mean, some of them may be more interested in the invoice part of it. Don't look at that. But there are people with capabilities. But starting point is a commitment from within the family that you have to start the dialogue. Once the dialogue begins, then things will start happening. Okay, so I hope you will start the dialogue, just move forward, and you don't look for an automatic, simple solution to any of the challenges. But if you start talking, things will evolve. Okay, so I stop here. Thank you very much. Best wishes to you. I'm sure you will do well.
Hello everyone. I'm not going to hold you back any longer than what you're supposed to be, so I'll make it nice and quick. Quick round of thank yous. Thank you, Professor Ramachandran. It was really nice and very insightful for sharing your ideas on family businesses. Mr. Gopal Srinivasan, he shared his idea of how family businesses are run from a fourth generation entrepreneur. That's really, really good. Most importantly, I'd like to thank you participants, because you have been identified as the present and the future of your respective businesses. So it is important, and it gives me immense pleasure to know that there's so much participation, and it only gives us the conviction that we have to do more such events to enlighten you, and more such events to share the knowledge and make your businesses better.